I don't think they trust each other at all. I mean, the Chinese, Russian and North Korean governments don't even trust their own people, so they're not going to trust a foreign government. They do seem to have some aligned values in countering democracy around the world and the freedom and prosperity that's been underpinned by the United States and Western Europe in the last 80 years. But overall, whether they can fight together for a common cause is probably a step too far. There are limitations, and we saw that in Israel's recent attack on Iran. Russia, China and North Korea provided zero assistance to them.
Yes. We already see North Korean troops fighting on Russia's side. But could Moscow ever bring in manpower from China as well? Is that a part of a wider plan for coordination, or is Beijing unlikely to go for that?
I think Beijing at this point is unlikely to provide overt troops into the war, but it's been doing just about everything short of that. It's been providing dual-use goods. It's clearly providing electronics for Russian drones and long-range missiles that are being used to kill and maim Ukrainian civilians and soldiers. It's buying cheap Russian oil to help keep Russia's budget somewhat afloat, even though it is in trouble. So, China is providing a huge amount of assistance to Russia already. It will continue doing so because it wants to keep Europeans involved in Europe. It doesn't want them to turn their attention to the Pacific.
Mr. Ryan, for you as a person who's closely watching Russian war in Ukraine, you know that Russia is launching nearly 1,000 drones per night at Ukrainian cities. And from your perspective, how many drones does Ukraine need to produce, just to stay even?
Well, it needs a couple of kinds of drones. Obviously, it needs all the battlefield drones, and we're seeing them being produced now by the millions. And the Unmanned Systems Force is bringing all that together in a more unified approach. We need the long-range attack drones and missiles that Ukraine has been developing over the last couple of years, the most recent of which, of course, is the Flamingo, but there's many other types. And these need to not just have long range, but large warheads to cause as much damage as possible to Russian oil refineries and military factories. And then the third type, and these are very important, is the interceptor drones that Ukraine has developed to intercept Russia's Shahed drones and other kind of drones that are currently being targeted at civilian infrastructure and civilian accommodation buildings in Kyiv and many other cities across Ukraine.
Yes, but what are the most effective strategies to counter drone swarms at this stage of the war in the light of current technologies? I mean, is that lasers, air defense? What is that?
It's going to be a bit of all of that. I mean, there's not one single silver bullet, unfortunately, to counter all this.
Yes.
It will require multiple layers within a coordinated national air missile and drone defence system. And Ukraine has developed that over the last few years, and it's constantly evolving and adapting it. And there's some very clever military and scientific people involved in that effort.
You know what? The latest news saying that over 1.1 million Russian military casualties have been reported since February 2022, since the full-scale invasion, basically. Do these figures point to a demoralized army? Can actually casualty numbers, whether accurate they are or not, drive change in Russian society or its leadership?
Well, it doesn't seem to be having a major impact at this point. The Russians still appear to be able to recruit 30 to 40,000 soldiers a month because they're giving them good bonuses. But we are seeing an uptick in AWOL from Russian troops. I think Putin is gambling that he can break the Ukrainian military before he breaks his own military. I'm not sure whether that's actually going to happen because at the end of the day, Ukraine is fighting for its land and its people. The Russians are not. And I think Putin in the long run might find that he's not able to break the Ukrainian people and the military.
Yeah. Do you think Russia might start targeting Ukraine's defense industry? Because we're working on that. We're building factories and everything. So will they start to strike them directly to cripple its weapons production? And if so, what would that mean for civilian safety?
Unfortunately, I think so. I mean, the Russians have shown they can't make breakthroughs on the front line, so they have to attack Ukraine. Otherwise, they can't beat the Ukrainian army in the field, so they're trying to beat the Ukrainian people at home. And part of that will be attacking more factories, but it's also about terror bombing. It's terror drones that are aimed deliberately at hurting Ukrainian people in their homes and on their streets. And you know, we've seen the example of this repulsive drone safari that the Russians are conducting. So they're trying to break Ukraine by breaking the people because they can't break its army.
Yeah, how would you describe this current situation on the battlefield? The recent news, Ukraine regained some small villages in the Donetsk region, but overall, what is your what is your view?
Well, there's among some people like to describe it as static. I don't think that's the case. It's a pretty dynamic battlefield. The changes in territory are small. They're not massive breakthroughs that some might like to see. But we are seeing territory change hands. We're seeing the Russians take some territory, although it's massive manpower losses. But we're also seeing the Ukrainian military take back to liberate towns in Ukrainian territory. That's extraordinarily important. At the same time, well, they're also imposing very large costs on the Russians.
Yeah, if a negotiated settlement looks unlikely at this point, does battlefield victory become the only option, and does that imply direct intervention from Ukraine's allies?
Well, I think that's one potential outcome. Certainly exhaustion might be another one. I mean, Russia, whilst it might not seem like it now, may just become exhausted, or there might be a coup to get rid of Putin. So there's a few different outcomes we might see if senior Russians, military and oligarchs decide that Putin is leading them down the wrong path. Certainly hope that might occur. But there's, only one side that doesn't want to negotiate at the moment. That's Vladimir Putin, and he will pay a price for that.
Mr. Ryan, me as an official subscriber to your articles, the last question is, the latest your piece was about such a painful and emotional word and process as mobilization. And could you just point on a few very, very important things that we have to learn from the Pacific War and maybe use that in Ukraine's situation?
Well, I think that piece was aimed at Australia because there's a lot we can learn from the war in the Pacific about industrial mobilisation, about mobilising people and getting the right balance between the military and industrial workers. But I think the important lesson is that, which we've learned not just from the Pacific War, but from the people of Ukraine in the last few years, that the most important part of mobilising a nation is national will, that shows that, if you aren't willing to defend yourself, no one's going to help you. And Ukraine has demonstrated as all a profound national will to preserve its sovereignty, preserve its freedom, and we're all taking a great example from that.
Absolutely, yeah. Having behind our back the whole West, basically we're still relying on ourselves. That's what I've seen.
Absolutely.
So, Mr. Ryan, thank you for your time this time. Thank you for joining me. It's always a pleasure speaking with you.
Thank you, Natalie. It's great to be with you again. Slava Ukraini.
Героям слава.